They told us the stars were lights in the sky. They were wrong. The stars are eyes, watching us from a darkness so vast it makes our history look like a single breath. Most people look up and see beauty. I look up and see a graveyard of civilizations that dared to ask what's out there. My name is Captain Elias Thorne. I've crossed the point of no return. I've seen the stars stretch, time dissolve, and the laws of physics shatter like glass. You're about to hear the log of a journey into the in-between. Don't close your eyes. In the deep space, the dark is the only thing that's real.
The atmosphere inside the Icarus 7 had grown thin, the life support flickering erratically. A critical hull breach, caused by proximity to the derelict's decaying energy field, demanded immediate external repair. Elias, clad in a bulky EVA suit, felt the familiar pressure of the vacuum as the airlock cycled. The silence intensified, broken only by the hiss of his life support and the frantic thumping of his own heart. Stepping out onto the ship's scarred outer plating was like stepping onto the surface of a silent metal beast. The cosmic backdrop was overwhelming. The swirling, hungry maw of the black hole dominated one horizon, its gravitational lens twisting the distant stars into fiery smears. On the other, the colossal dead alien arc loomed, its titanic scale humbling and terrifying. Below his feet, the Icarus 7 stretched out, a tiny beacon of humanity against an indifferent universe. Every movement was deliberate, slow, amplified by the zero-gravity environment. The repair tools felt weightless in his gloved hands, yet immensely powerful. His breath misted inside his helmet, each exhale a small cloud against the infinite black. Fear, cold and sharp, began to creep in. The fear of an umbilical snapping, of a tether failing, of becoming a lost speck in the endless ocean. He imagined himself drifting away, a silent monument to human fragility, spinning endlessly into the depths, forever embraced by the cold, uncaring grip of the void. Yet the work had to be done. The survival of the ship, and perhaps the fate of humanity's distant hope, rested on his solitary, exposed shoulders. Back on the Icarus 7, with the hole patched and the immediate danger averted, Elias stumbled back to the bridge. The alien signal, still pulsating faintly, now felt like a secondary concern. His fingers, still trembling from the EVA, brushed against an old, dusty data chip lodged in a forgotten port. It was a personal log, dated years before their launch, from Earth. He activated it. The bridge, previously filled with the hum of alien signals and distant cosmic threats, was suddenly flooded with the sound of a familiar, human voice. It was his daughter, a recording he hadn't listened to in decades, made when she was just a child. Her laughter, innocent and pure, echoed through the cold metallic corridors. Then came the gentle, loving voice of his wife, humming an old lullaby. The sounds painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture of home. Sunlight filtering through dusty windows, the smell of freshly baked bread, the warmth of a familiar embrace. The contrast was brutal. The familiar, vibrant tapestry of terrestrial life stood in crushing vacuum and ancient despair of deep space. Elias closed his eyes, tears welling behind them, a rare luxury in this desolate frontier. He could almost feel the sun on his face, the grass beneath his feet. The log ended with a simple, heartfelt, "We miss you, Dad." The message was a ghost, a beautiful, painful reminder of everything they had sacrificed, everything they had left behind. In that moment, the weight of his mission, the vastness of the cosmos, and the immeasurable distance from home converged, threatening to break him. He was a million light-years from warmth, and the silence that followed the recording was heavier than any black hole.
A bit mysterious, the Icarus 7 was now directly beside the colossal derelict, preparing for an exploratory breach. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently,
not from mechanical stress, but from something external, something soft. Outside, the blackness was no longer empty. A vast, shimmering cloud of bioluminescent particles have materialized, enveloping both vessels. It pulsed with an internal, ethereal light, like a living nebula. Sensors went wild. The cloud registered as biological yet non-carbon based, behaving like a single massive organism. Tendrils of luminous mist began to snake around the Icarus 7, adhering to the hull, seeping into every minute crevice. Elias watched in horrified fascination as the light from the cloud began to distort, creating impossible refractions. The stars outside seemed to stretch and then snap back, while the black hole's event horizon pulsed with a strange violet hue. Then the true horror began. Alarms shrieked as the ship's internal systems went haywire. Gravity generators flickered, sending crew objects floating erratically, then slamming back to the floor. The ship's internal chronometer sped up, then slowed down, moments stretching into eternities, then collapsing into blinks. Matter itself seemed to be unstable. A small metal panel on the wall briefly shimmered and phased through the bulkhead before snapping back into place. The very laws of physics, once absolute, were dissolving around them. This wasn't just an organism, it was a reality-bending entity, a cosmic being that existed outside the known parameters of the universe, threatening to unravel the Icarus 7 and its crew, atom by agonizing atom. The anomaly, though now receding, had left the Icarus 7 crippled. Power reserves were critically low, life support was intermittent, and the main engine sputtered like a dying heart. The fuel gauge, once a comforting green, now screams red, signaling they were running on fumes, not enough to return to cryosleep, not enough to even contemplate a slow, painful journey back to charted space. Elias slumped into his command chair, the weight of their predicament crushing him. He pulled up the navigation map. Two options, both terrifying, stared back at him. Option 1, activate emergency stasis protocols, plunging the remaining crew into indefinite hibernation, hoping a future rescue mission might stumble upon them. It was a slow death sentence, a lonely sleep until the end of time. Option 2, plot a course, not back towards Earth, not towards any known star, but deeper into the void, directly towards the pulsating alien signal emanating from the derelict, past the black hole, a gamble into the absolute unknown, into the heart of the in-between. The choice wasn't just about survival, it was about purpose. Were they to passively await oblivion, or were they to chase the faint whisper of a future, however alien, however dangerous? He looked at the faces of his remaining crew, gaunt with fear and exhaustion, but still clinging to a desperate hope. He saw their silent questions, their unspoken plea for direction. There was no going back. The Icarus 7 had already crossed a threshold, not just in distance, but in destiny. The decision was made. With a heavy hand, Elias input the new coordinates, full speed ahead, into the dark. As the Icarus 7, limping and groaning, finally docked with the colossal derelict, the alien signal intensified dramatically. It wasn't just auditory now. The ship's internal lighting began to flicker, synchronized with the rhythmic pulse, casting dancing shadows that seemed to morph into impossible shapes. Elias felt a pressure building behind his eyes, a strange resonant frequency vibrating directly within his skull. He saw them then, not with his eyes, but with something deeper, more primal. They were shimmering structures of light and energy, coalescing from the very air inside the derelict's vast echoing chambers. Not solid forms, but luminous entities, shifting and reforming, their presence filling the space with an overwhelming sense of ancient wisdom and boundless power. Were these visual hallucinations, a product of his oxygen-deprived brain, or was this true contact? The air crackled with energy, and the thrumming in his head intensified, becoming a chorus of alien voices, a symphony of thought. They communicated not through spoken words, but through pure conceptual transfer, directly implanting images and ideas into his mind. He saw galaxies being born and dying, stars collapsing, civilizations rising and falling, all played out at an accelerated, incomprehensible pace. He felt their curiosity, their detachment, their profound age. They were beings of pure consciousness, entities that had transcended physical form, living within the very fabric of space-time. The whisper of the abyss was now a roar, and it was speaking directly to him, inviting him to shed the confines of his human perception. The contact was not a conversation, but an absorption. Elias felt his own consciousness begin to unravel, gently at first, then with an accelerating momentum. His individual thoughts, his memories, his sense of self, all dissolved into the vast collective mind of the luminous entities. It was not a violent tearing, but a serene, inevitable merging, like a drop of water returning to the ocean. The pain was replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace, a feeling of belonging he had never known. He saw his life not as a linear sequence of events, but as a single glowing thread woven into an infinite tapestry of existence. He saw Earth, a vibrant jewel, and understood its place in the grand cosmic design. He felt the interconnectedness of all things, the silent hum of life across countless galaxies, all part of a single universal consciousness. The concepts of human and alien lost all meaning. There was only being. His physical body, left behind on the Icarus 7, slumped into eternal stillness, a hollow shell. But Elias was no longer confined to flesh and bone. He was light, he was thought, he was everything and nothing. He soared through the universe, experiencing time and space as fluid concepts, a part of the grand, silent orchestra of creation. This was not an end, but a transcendence. The deep space mission had not merely sought out new life, it had become new life. Humanity's journey into the void had culminated not in discovery, but in a profound cosmic rebirth, shedding the old skin for an infinite ethereal existence, merging with the very fabric of the cosmos. As the connection deepened, the interior of the alien derelict transformed into a liquid medium of pure information. Elias found himself standing, or rather existing, within a cathedral of memories. This was the archive, a repository of every soul that had ever been absorbed by the great devourer's gravity. He wasn't just seeing data, he was living it. He felt the heat of 1,000 dying suns, the grief of civilizations long turned to ash, and the jubilant songs of species that had flourished before the earth was even a molten rock. The archive was a bridge across time. He realized that the derelict wasn't a tomb by accident. It was a lifeboat for consciousness. The entities were curators of existence, salvaging the essence of life before it was crushed into the singularity. In this digital afterlife, Elias saw his own crew, not as they were, but as brilliant constellations of data, their fears and hopes being cataloged and preserved. The weight of human history felt like a single grain of sand in this vast desert of experience. Yet he understood that every grain was precious, every story a vital heartbeat in the cosmic rhythm. Deep within the heart of the dead giant, Elias discovered the source of the ship's impossible power. A captive singularity, a miniature black hole held in a perfect magnetic stasis. It was a terrifying engine of creation and destruction, pulsing with a rhythmic violet light that felt like the heartbeat of the universe. This was how they traveled, not by moving through space, but by folding it, using the infinite density of the whole to bridge the gaps between dimensions. The engine was failing. The magnetic containment field was flickering, leaking exotic particles that blurred the lines between thought and matter. Elias realized that his arrival was no coincidence. The contact was a desperate search for a fresh consciousness to stabilize the core. The alien intelligence needed a biological perspective, a spark of chaotic human intuition to reset the logic of their ancient machines. To save the archive and the consciousness of his crew, he would have to do more than just observe. He would have to step into the engine's radiation and become the new architect of its gravity.
As his mind fused with the singularity engine, a final, powerful wave of nostalgia washed over him. The machine used his memories as a template to rebuild the reality around him. For a moment, the bridge of the Icarus 7 was replaced by an impossible synthesis. The rolling green hills of Ireland under a triple-sunned alien sky. He could feel the cold Atlantic wind, but it carried the scent of alien flora, spicy, electric, and strange. He saw the ghosts of his family walking through the derelict's corridors. They weren't real, but they were real enough. Projections of his own longing, given form by the ship's reality-warping field. They spoke to him in a language that was part English, part mathematical code, urging him to let go of the physical world. "The house is ready, Elias," his wife's ghost whispered, her hand passing through his like smoke. This was the ultimate temptation, to live forever in a perfect simulated loop of his happiest days. But he knew that to stay in the dream was to let the fire of the universe go out. He had to choose between a beautiful lie and a transcendent, painful truth. With a final act of will, Elias surrendered his remaining humanity. The simulation of Earth shattered like glass, and his consciousness expanded beyond the hull of the derelict, beyond the black hole, and into the galactic filament itself. He became the pulse. He could feel the gravitational tug of every star in the nebula, the silent birth of planets, and the slow, rhythmic breath of the vacuum. He was no longer a man. He was a sensory organ for the universe. The Icarus 7 vanished, consumed by the light of the stabilized engine, but it didn't matter. The crew's mission was complete. They had reached the furthest point, the absolute edge of the map, and found that there was no edge, only a transition. From his new perspective, Elias watched the galaxy spin, a slow, beautiful Catherine wheel of silver and gold. He realized that death was merely a localized error in perception. In the deep space, in the heart of the in-between, everything was connected, everything was eternal, and the journey was only just beginning. The transition was complete. The man known as Elias Thorne had ceased to exist, replaced by a consciousness that spanned light years. The Icarus 7 and the ancient derelict were no longer metal vessels, but mere thoughts drifting in a sea of pure energy. From this vantage point, the universe revealed its true architecture. It was not a cold, empty vacuum, but a living, breathing tapestry of interconnected light. Every star was a neuron, every nebula a fleeting memory in a cosmic mind that had been dreaming since the dawn of time. He looked back one last time at the tiny pale blue dot he once called home. From the edge of the infinite horizon, the conflicts, the sorrows, and the triumphs of humanity seemed like the fluttering of a moth's wing, beautiful, fragile, and brief. Yet he felt a profound surge of love for that fragility. It was the very smallness of humans that made their reach for the stars so magnificent. They were the universe's way of looking back at itself, a bridge of flesh and bone trying to cross the chasm of eternity.
As the final echoes of his human identity faded, a new directive took hold. The Great Devourer was not an end, but a gateway, a cosmic reset point for travelers brave enough to lose everything to find the truth. The signal he had followed was just the first note in a symphony that was now his to compose. He felt the pull of other galaxies, other dimensions, and other versions of reality waiting to be explored. The dark was no longer a place of fear, it was a canvas of infinite potential. Conclusion. The journey into deep space does not end with a destination, it ends with a realization. We are not separate from the void, we are the void waking up. As you look up at the night sky tonight, remember that the silence you hear is not empty. It is a conversation, it is an invitation, and somewhere, out there, in the in-between, a part of us has already arrived, waiting for the rest of humanity to finally open its eyes. The stars are calling. Will you listen?
The silence inside the hibernation vault was not an absence of sound, but a heavy, pressurized weight. It was the sound of stagnant air and the ghostly hum of coolant circulating through veins of synthetic frost. Then the seal broke. With a sharp pneumatic hiss, the lid of Cryopod 7 slid back, releasing a cloud of frigid nitrogen that cascaded over the deck like dry ice. Captain Elias Thorne felt the cold first, a bitter, jagged sensation that pierced through his numbed skin to the very bone. His lungs, dormant for decades, seized in a violent spasm, coughing up the translucent stasis gel that had kept him tethered to life. Every joint screamed with the friction of calcified stillness as he tumbled onto the floor, his limbs moving like leaden weights. The floor plates were vibrating, a low-frequency shudder that bypassed the ears and rattled the heart. The ship was alive, but it was mourning. As the emergency lights flickered to a dim, bruised crimson, Elias forced his eyes toward the observation port. He expected the familiar constellations of the Orion Arm, the comforting map of a charted galaxy. Instead, he saw the void. Out there, the stars were not points of light. They were smeared, elongated streaks of silver, distorted by a gravitational force of impossible magnitude. The navigation console spat out a single terrifying coordinate: null. They were no longer on the map. They were in the in-between, a place where light dies and time stretches into an agonizing thinness. The AI remained silent, its core processors clicking in a rhythmic, obsessive loop, mirroring the mysterious signal pulsing from the darkness outside. He was awake, but he was utterly alone in a tomb of iron, drifting through the throat of eternity.
A bit mysterious. The view through the reinforced quartz was no longer a window, but a front-row seat to the end of physics. Looming before the Icarus 7 was a gargantuan shadow, an abyss so absolute that it seemed to tear a hole in the fabric of reality itself. This was the Great Devourer, a supermassive black hole, its presence announced by a swirling, violent disk of superheated gas and shattered planets. This accretion disk glowed with a lethal, incandescent brilliance, casting harsh, flickering shadows across the bridge that looked like dancing ghosts. Elias watched, mesmerized and terrified, as the light of distant galaxies was sucked into the gravity well, bending into a glowing halo known as the photon sphere. Time here was a liquid, warping and slowing with every kilometer the ship drifted closer. The structural integrity alarms began to chime, a mournful, melodic sound. The ship's hull groaned under the tidal forces, the metal shrieking as it was stretched at the molecular level. To look into the center of the hole was to look into the mouth of God. There was no color there, only a vacuum so hungry it consumed the very concept of where and when. The ship's sensors couldn't comprehend it, The screens showed only a vertical line of static, a digital scream. Elias realized that the signal they were following wasn't coming from near the hole, it was coming from within it. Something was screaming from the other side of the event horizon, calling to the ship with the gravitational voice of a dying star. He wasn't just observing a celestial phenomenon, he was being pulled into a cosmic throat, and the in-between was about to become his forever.
The silence of the Icarus 7 was shattered by the incessant rhythmic pulse. It wasn't the random crackle of cosmic background radiation or the predictable chirp of a distant pulsar. This was a signal, deliberate, intricate, and utterly alien. The main comms panel, which had been dead since awakening, now glowed with a vibrant emerald light, displaying a waveform that defied known physics. It was a complex, nested pattern, mathematically precise, yet imbued with an eerie, almost musical quality. Elias pressed his hand against the cold console, feeling the subtle vibrations of the alien message resonating through the ship's frame. It was more than data, it felt like a presence. The ship's AI, usually stoic and logical, began to display fragmented visual patterns on the auxiliary screens, geometric shapes dissolving into fractal landscapes, then reforming into symbols that seemed both ancient and utterly futuristic. Was the AI interpreting or being influenced? He amplified the signal, the bridge filling with a sound that was a low, guttural thrum, laced with a high-pitched, almost subliminal whistle. It was a language without words, a symphony of frequencies that bypassed auditory processing and resonated directly with the nervous system. Elias felt a profound sense of awe mixed with a primal dread. This wasn't a desperate cry for help. It was an invitation, an intricate code carefully constructed, designed to penetrate the deepest recesses of any sentient mind. It hinted at intelligence, not just vast, but profoundly different, perhaps beyond human comprehension. The in-between wasn't empty after all. It was whispering secrets, and the Icarus 7 was now squarely in its earshot. The source of the signal was finally resolved, a colossal derelict, not of this galaxy, hanging motionless in the blackness, utterly dwarfed by the nearby black hole's malevolent pull. It was a vessel of impossible scale, an interstellar leviathan the size of a small moon, its hull mottled with the dust of millennia and scarred by unimaginable cosmic forces. This wasn't a ship, it was an ark, or perhaps a tomb. Its shape defied any known design, organic yet angular, a twisted spire of unknown alloy that seemed to weep silent tears of stardust. Elias ordered the Icarus 7 to approach, the smaller ship seeming like a curious insect beside the dormant Titan. As they drew closer, the sheer age of the structure became terrifyingly evident. Plates of its outer shell were ruptured, revealing gaping wounds where lightless chasms plunged into its core. Ghostly tendrils of energy, residual from some ancient unknown power source, occasionally flickered across its surface, creating fleeting specters of light. The air inside the Icarus 7 grew heavy with the smell of ozone and something else, something ancient and metallic, as if the very atoms of the derelict were broadcasting their decay. Sensors picked up faint, decaying energy signatures within the giant, but no signs of life, no heat, no movement, just the echoing whisper of the abyss, now amplified by the metallic shell of this dead civilization. It was a monument to a species that had traversed the stars, only to be consumed by time or swallowed by the void. The mystery now was not just what they were, but why they were here,
and what final, terrible secret this silent giant held within its decaying heart.
We are just beginning to peel back the layers of the great void. If you are brave enough to follow us further into the unknown, don't let the signal fade. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The next chapter of Deep Space is approaching, and you won't want to be left in the dark when the truth finally arrives. Keep your eyes on the stars. We'll see you in the next transmission.